In a small town on the edge of a bustling city, where skyscrapers towered over crumbling alleyways and the gap between rich and poor seemed as wide as the ocean, lived a boy named Daniel, just 14 years old, with dreams bigger than the streets he called home. Daniel had never known luxury. His shoes were torn at the soles, his clothes often handed down from strangers or picked from donation boxes, and yet his heart carried a warmth that could outshine even the coldest winter mornings, because no matter how little he had, he always believed in sharing, in giving, in being a light to others who were just as lost in the shadows of hardship, and it was this spirit that would soon change not only his life, but the life of a man who thought he had seen and owned everything. Daniel lived with his mother, who worked long hours cleaning houses, and his little sister, who was frail from an illness that drained both her strength and the family's savings. Most days, their meals were made up of bread, rice, and whatever his mother could bring home after her shifts, and yet Daniel never complained. Instead, he would reassure his mother with a smile and whisper, "We'll be okay, Mom, good things are coming," though deep down he often wondered if he was only saying it to keep her spirits from breaking. One chilly afternoon, as Daniel walked home from a long day of school where he had quietly endured the embarrassment of classmates mocking his worn backpack and faded shirt, he stopped at a small convenience store, not to buy snacks for himself, because he rarely had more than a few coins, but simply to look at the bright displays and imagine what it must feel like to walk inside with money in hand and no worry about prices. As he stood by the door, he noticed a man sitting on the sidewalk, shivering slightly under a thin jacket, his beard unshaven, his hands tucked under his arms as if trying to keep warm, and in front of him lay a cardboard sign with just 3 words, "Hungry. Please help." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He reached into his pocket, where he carried the only dollar his mother had given him for the week, a single crumpled bill he had guarded carefully, planning to buy a notebook for his school assignments, because his teachers had told him that without it, he would fall behind. But as he looked at the man on the ground, his hunger plain in his eyes, Daniel felt a tug so powerful that it left no room for hesitation. He stepped forward, knelt down, and placed that single dollar in the man's hand, whispering, "I don't have much, but I hope this helps." The man looked up in surprise, his eyes glassy, as though he could not comprehend why a boy with so little would give him anything, and though Daniel quickly walked away, embarrassed by the man's tears, he left behind a seed that would soon grow into something unimaginable. What Daniel didn't know was that the man sitting on the sidewalk was not truly homeless, nor was he in desperate need of food. He was Michael Reynolds, a billionaire entrepreneur who had built his fortune from nothing but had long since forgotten the value of compassion, disguising himself as part of a personal experiment to reconnect with humanity after years of being surrounded by wealth, power, and people who only treated him as a stepping stone for their own gain. Michael had been out on the streets for a week, watching how people treated him when they believed he was poor, and the results had been disheartening. People walked past him, some sneered, others gave fake smiles, and very few offered even a kind word, let alone money. But then came Daniel, a boy who had nothing yet still gave everything he had, and in that moment, Michael felt something shift inside him, as though the walls he had built around his heart began to crack. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. The image of the boy's torn shoes and shy smile replayed in his mind, and he kept asking himself why, when the world had so often taught people to look out for themselves, this boy chose to give away his only dollar without expecting anything in return. 2 days later, Michael decided he could not simply move on. He needed to find that boy, to understand him, to do something that would honor the generosity he had witnessed. Disguised once again, Michael returned to the same corner near the store, asking quietly among locals if they knew of a young boy with a kind smile who lived nearby, and soon enough, a shopkeeper pointed him toward a small neighborhood where children played barefoot in the streets and families shared cramped apartments. Michael waited until school ended, and sure enough, he saw Daniel walking home, holding his little sister's hand, guiding her carefully as though every step she took was precious. Michael followed at a distance, and when the boy reached the worn-down building that served as their home, Michael finally approached, taking off his disguise to reveal his true self. Daniel's mother, startled by the presence of a stranger at her door, hesitated until Michael gently explained who he was, how her son had given away his only dollar to someone he thought was homeless, and how that act had stirred something within him that money could not buy. Tears welled in her eyes as she glanced at Daniel, who looked both confused and shy, unsure why his small gesture mattered so much. Michael then revealed his plan. He wanted to help them, not with charity, but with opportunity. He offered to cover the medical expenses for Daniel's sister, to provide Daniel with a scholarship to the best schools, and to help his mother start a small business so she would never again have to exhaust herself cleaning other people's homes. At first, they couldn't believe him, for it seemed like something out of a dream, but when the doctors arrived the very next day and Daniel's sister was given the care she had long needed, they knew it was real, and the transformation began. For Daniel, life changed in ways he could never have imagined. Suddenly, he had books, uniforms, a desk of his own, and teachers who encouraged his intelligence rather than overlooking him because of his poverty. His mother, once weary and defeated, now smiled more often as she managed her own small bakery funded by Michael's support, and his sister grew healthier with each passing day. Yet what truly stayed with Daniel was not the material blessings but the lesson that his one small act of kindness, giving away a single dollar, had created ripples so vast they reached a man of immense wealth and transformed not only their lives but Michael's as well. For Michael, the encounter with Daniel reignited a fire he thought he had lost. He realized that wealth without compassion was empty, that true richness lay in the ability to touch lives, and he began a foundation dedicated to supporting children like Daniel all across the country, inspired by the boy who reminded him of the power of selflessness. Years later, Daniel would stand before a crowd at his high school graduation, wearing a cap and gown, his sister cheering from the front row, his mother beaming with pride, and Michael sitting quietly in the back, his heart swelling as he watched the boy he once met on a cold street grow into a young man full of promise. And as Daniel spoke into the microphone, his words carried the same warmth he had shown that day with his single dollar. What we give doesn't have to be big, it just has to come from the heart, because kindness, even the smallest kind, can change lives, including our own. The audience erupted in applause, many with tears in their eyes, and Michael, who had lived through boardrooms, luxury estates, and accolades from the world, realized that nothing compared to the joy of witnessing kindness come full circle. Answer: the story of the poor boy who gave his only dollar to an undercover millionaire became not just a tale of generosity rewarded, but a timeless reminder that every act of compassion, no matter how small, can ignite transformations far greater than we ever imagine, leaving behind a legacy of love, hope, and humanity that endures long after the moment has passed, because sometimes, it takes the simplest gesture from the most unlikely soul to remind us of the greatness that lives within us all.